To follow up on my comments about higher law as a part of the American Creed, I thought I would provide you a little bit of background about Episcopal mission to Native Americans in the United States that would bring you up to Hare and to the reading that you're going to do this week for your analysis. You know, it's interesting to think that a mission to Native Americans began back in 1606 with a charter issued to Jamestown colony by James I, and he suggested in that charter that the purpose of the colony at Jamestown, this is back in 1606, was, quote, to preach and plant the true word of God among the savages according to the rites and doctrines of the Church of England. Again, there's that notion about Native Americans as being savages as opposed to the white civilized colonists who had come to these shores. And so that mission of preaching and doing missionary work among Native Americans with the Jamestown colony being the center of that continued until 1622, but there was a uprising among Native Americans, and so that after 1622 the policy toward them became not one of missionizing but one of extermination. It begins a long and sorry history in our nation's past. However, in other parts of the colonies, you have work among Native Americans that is rather more positive, so that in 1644, for example, John Eliot begins Indian work in Massachusetts, work that continued until his death in 1695. What has interested me about John Eliot is that he began to translate the Bible into Algonquin, and established among the Native Americans in western Massachusetts 14 kind of cells, or what he called praying towns, among Native Americans. And so it wasn't simply an attempt to jerk Native Americans into an acceptance of white European culture, but an attempt to reach out to Native Americans to learn their language and to translate the gospel into their own language in their own terms. Something similar takes place in New York, so that in 1696 Trinity Church in New York, which is on the lower part of the island of Manhattan, was organized, 1696, so a very early Episcopal community, and one of its early rectors then sought to translate the Book of Common Prayer into the Mohawk language, again like Eliot, attempting to reach Native Americans on their own terms. In 1704, the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts, an English effort from the Church of England, sent its first missionary, Thurgood Moore, to the Iroquois Nation in New York State. In 1746, Sir William Johnson was named the Crown's Indian Commissioner in New York and exercised tremendous influence on his brother-in-law, who was a Native American, a Mohawk named Joseph Brant, who was an influential member of the Church of England throughout the Revolutionary War, ultimately leaving the colonies and moving to Ontario, but he was really responsible for founding the first mission among Mohawks in Ontario, the first Protestant chapel in that Canadian province. and worked to translate the English prayer book into the Mohawk language. We've spent a lot of time reading about John Henry Hobart, the Bishop of New York, and we know of Hobart as being a high church Episcopalian. We know about the way in which he considered the Episcopal Church to be, the true church, if you will. And yet he was the one who also founded the first American Indian mission in the Episcopal Church among the Oneida of New York. And he also ordained Eleazar Williams, who was very likely a Mohawk, but sought to hide that from most of his contemporaries. It was Hobart who ordained Williams, and Williams was probably in reality the first Native American Episcopal priest. The Oneidas were exiled to Wisconsin from New York. The Episcopal Church followed them to Wisconsin, and indeed the first church in the territory of Wisconsin was named after Hobart. You read about in Hine and Shattuck about the importance of James Lloyd Breck in the history of the Episcopal Church and Native American missions. He, along with in Megabo, established St. Columba's at Gull Lake in Minnesota. And this mission to the Ojibwa became the mother mission of Indian work west of the Mississippi River after 1852. You also read in Hine and Shattuck that Bishop Jackson Kemper ordained in Megabo to the diaconate in 1859, and then in 1867 in Minnesota, in Megabo was ordained the first American Indian priest of the Episcopal Church, if we don't count Eleazar Williams as being that first Episcopal priest. In 1871, the U.S. government ended the treaty-making era with Native Americans. By that time, there were 650 treaties that the United States government had entered into with Native American tribes. And there were, by that count, in 1871, 350 Indian nations. And it was in 1871 that you have the founding of the Episcopal Standing Committee on Indian Affairs. And by 1882, the Episcopal Church had sent 80 missionaries into Indian country and had ordained 20 Indians to the diaconate and 2 to the priesthood. As with African Americans, the Episcopal Church was rather slow and rather reluctant in ordaining Native Americans to the priesthood. And in 1872, then, that brings us to William Hobart Hare, who was consecrated Bishop of Niobrara. And as you know, he is enormously influential in his jurisdiction over the great Sioux Nation. And when he died in 1909, there were 100 Indian congregations where there had only been 9, and 26 Native American clergy where there had only been 3. Har is an interesting character about whom you will be reading this week and working from his own words. A person who reflects that kind of paternalism that we saw with respect to work among African Americans, but also Har's work is characterized too by kind of coerced assimilation, and that's a chapter in the history of the Episcopal Church's relationship to Native Americans that we'll want to be very conscious of in our work this week.